It's coaching carousel season up in college football. We got that transfer portal season as well. And we're going to talk about the college football playoff selection. All that coming up on Barely Bowl Eligible.
This is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
We're Barely Bowl Eligible here on KC Sports Network's always draft season channel. Hanging out with Maddie Lane. I'm Tucker Franklin. Maddie, how you doing, my man?
I'm doing pretty good. We got an interesting spot of the college schedule this week. We got some Army Navy going on. We got some FCS playoff. We got we got football, but not quite the level of football that we're aiming for. I did hear this, Tuck. Starting next year, this weekend is the first round of the 12-team playoff. Next year, there will be real college football, like that really, really matters, being played on Saturday night. Like they're not gonna schedule it over Army Navy, but they will have real football games that matter starting Saturday night. I thought that was gonna be pretty cool next year. Give you something to look forward to a little bit.
That will be really cool, and I'm really excited. I'm looking forward to the home playoff games for these schools. Like these playoff games to be hosted by the schools. Like that's going to be really cool to have actual playoff atmospheres. It's not like, the FCS or the D3 or the D2 have been doing this forever, right? They could just have copied this from, but you mentioned some pretty good matchups in the FCS ranks this week. Idaho plays Albany, that's a 4-5 matchup in a quarterfinal game. South Dakota, North Dakota State, you got a really good matchup there. North Dakota State advancing over Montana State on a blocked field goal in overtime, or blocked extra point, I should say, in overtime. But South Dakota State, the number one team in the country, still rolling. They'll play against Villanova, which Villanova's had a really good year for a basketball school, and Furman and Montana going off in the other quarterfinal to go to the Final Four of the FCS Championship.
Who's winning?
Good games.
Who's winning it all? Who's taking the cake?
South Dakota State's looked really good this year, and it's really easy for me to say.
Their running back's a stud. Like he's actually really good. I don't watch a ton of this level of football, but like I'll turn it on every now and then when I get a chance, and when I get to watch South Dakota State and Isaiah Davis, it's like, oh, I wonder why that guy's still there, because he definitely could play up at the Power 5 level the way he moves at his size.
It's easy for me to say that South Dakota State's is going to win it all because they're the number one team in the country right now, and they entered the tournament as the 1 seed. But Montana's been playing some really good football. They nearly, let's see, they had the bye week, or they were the number 2 team, so they had the bye week, and then they faced off against Delaware, who barely squeaked out a win against Lafayette, and they smoked Delaware. It was 49-14. The Grizz looked good. Now I've given you the number 1 and number 2 teams to look out for in this tournament. But look, they're really good. I watched a couple Grizz games this year. Albany is having a good year. Look, they had Jared Verse. Like they've had the history of dudes at Albany, but Idaho's got a really good quarterback. They're staying alive, and they're hosting a game at 9 p.m. Central Time, 10 Eastern. Maddie, that the Kiwi Dome's going to be hosting the game at 10 Eastern time on Saturday. And look, their quarterback, I think, won like best freshman of the year in FCS level last year. He's been playing okay this year. I think he's been dealing with some injuries, but I'm a big Idaho fan. I'm a Vandals fan. But I'm very excited to see how that whole tournament shakes out. Not how I anticipated starting this podcast, man. He's talking about the FCS playoff bracket. But nevertheless, we got the playoffs, the big boy playoffs, the 14 playoff to talk about. The big boy playoffs. And Maddie, every time I've talked about the playoffs, I just always think back to that rant that Mike Leach had in 2017 about that probably doesn't narrow it down all that much about the college football playoff, but like he was saying, like, every level does it one way, and why do we have to be different? Why do we only need 4? It doesn't make sense to have 5 power conference champions and only 4 teams get into the playoff. And this was the first year, Maddie, that it really ended up being a problem.
Yeah, it is. And like this is a big thing for a lot of people that were generally against expansion. The big thing was 4 never made sense to just about anybody because of what you just said. You consider yourself the Power 5. How are only 4 teams going to make it in when you're saying these 5 conferences are all equal? We know they're not, But if you're going to say they're equal, how are you going to only let 4 teams in? So people that even were against expansion were like, hey, 4 doesn't make sense. Just do 6, give the top 2 teams a bye, and then you have, your 5 Power 5 winners. Then you get your group of 5 team in. Everybody wins. 6 always made more sense than 4. It was never really an issue, right? The first year of the playoff committee. It was a little funky, but besides that, nothing else.
TCU.
It's never been a problem, right? Yeah, it's never been a problem. It's everything has essentially worked its way out. Maybe we've split some hairs on 4 and 5 in years past, but it was never the same issue that you have this year, where you have 5 conference champions that are all worthy of being in the playoff, and you have to decide which one you're going to leave out. And unfortunately for Florida State, the ACC stinks, and they suffered injuries to their quarterback. And we got to see just how bad that team looked without their quarterback. So they became the ones looking on the outside. Absolutely sucks for that program, for their fans. I get why people are upset, but at the end of the day, the College Football Playoff Committee has always said in their mission goal, it is to find the 4 best teams, the teams that are, they're going to be the 4 best in the country, most likely to win the national title. It hasn't always played out that way because the resumes have been so significantly different. Yeah. This year, all these resumes are close enough that they finally got to lean into the best teams. And unfortunately, that injury to Jordan Travis really derailed Florida State's chances.
Well, I really even think, I think what people take exception to a lot is the committee's inconsistency when it came to ranking Florida State versus ranking, Liberty per se. Let's say like Liberty. SMU had they finished very well against the Tulane team that, we thought were wagons. Like we thought that team was a really good team. SMU came out there with a backup quarterback and looked really good and won that AAC championship on Tulane's home turf. And so they could have used the justification that they used for the number 4 seed with Tulane and or not Tulane, with SMU and Liberty, but they chose to say, hey, look, he was an undefeated team. I think that's where people were frustrated from. Obviously, it's a case-by-case basis, but I think the committee did a really good job of blending the most deserving teams with the best 4 teams. Like, I have a hard time thinking that Georgia's not one of the best 4 teams, Maddie. I know they lost 1 game, but the 1 game that really mattered, like that, they had won 29 straight. I know that that's hard for me to. I don't know where you put them in. Like I think that they got I think they got 4 really good teams in this one, but it's hard for me to look at Georgia and say that they're on the outside looking in. And I think Georgia fans have a reason to be upset too, because if they're not number 5, right, which they were number 6 in this whole thing, there's just a lot that goes into it. I think that's what people are frustrated most about. I think people have every right to be upset, truthfully. But I think and in the same breath, I'm going to say, I think they made the right choice. I think they made the right choice. I think people have the right to be upset. Somebody was going to be upset. That's the thing, is that somebody was going to be upset with no matter what decision that they made. I think this is the one that, when we were kind of talking it over, Maddie, in the group chats leading up to Selection Sunday, that made the most sense the more I thought about it, of okay, that seems and I had sent a tweet out 10 minutes before the selection committee went out, before they announced it, of the exact picks. And I said, this is what makes most sense. That's my final answer. And I understand. I get Florida State's being upset, but we were wildly close, Maddie, to having the first playoffs that happened, Alabama, Oregon, Florida State, Ohio State. We were incredibly close to having those 4 teams in the playoff again.
Yeah. And to your point about Georgia being left out, if you're going to say that you're getting the best 4 teams, it is hard to see a path in which Georgia's left out, but you do have to balance the resume part of it a little bit, right?
Sure.
There has to be some level of balancing act there going on. And we're talking, they didn't win their national championship. So to put Georgia in, you got to keep out a national champion. There's so many different layers to it. I think you ultimately hit the nail on the head. They got it right. People are going to be mad, but guess when you're not going to be mad? When you're watching Alabama play Michigan in a couple weeks, you're not going to be mad. When you're not watching Michigan beat the crap out of a lifeless Florida State team because they don't have a guy that can play quarterback, you're no longer going to be upset that this is the way it went down. It makes more sense. I get being upset until then, but once it's time to play the games, everyone's happy. I'm glad this is the final year of the 4-team playoff. I don't particularly like it for the reasons I said at the top, but I also like it a lot better than the BCS where we just got 1 single game because guess what? I like more good football. And at the very least, they got me an extra weekend of college football between the better teams, the best teams that matter with the 14 playoff. Now they're going to expand it more to 12. I have no problems watching some of those teams that would have been in the playoff this year, the Missouris, Ole Misses, teams like that, Penn State. I have no problem watching them for an extra weekend of football in a game they care about, right? So
Yeah.
I'm happy we're going to the 12 team next year. I think we're ending it on a very controversial note. So it's just going to be perfect when Bama rolls off into the sunset as national champions of all one-score wins.
I do think that this was the most controversial year. If I remember correctly, in 2014, the first year of the playoff was pretty controversial because of like TCU blowing out Baylor in the Big 12 championship. I think it was Baylor. And then they were dropped from 4. Like I think that they were in the playoffs and then they dropped out of the playoffs.
The issue was those two teams were tied. Baylor and TCU were tied. Whoever won the Big 12 championship game had a bad loss that year, but then they also won the national championship game like convincingly. And instead of putting either Big 12 team in, they just slapped. Was it Ohio State? Did they just decide to slap in?
Yes, Ohio State.
Who was down to their third quarterback, right? That was the third quarterback year. Cardale Jones came in and dropped 60 points essentially on Wisconsin in the Big 10 title games. Like, yes, that was the most controversial year, but they just said, Big 12, we don't know what to do with you guys. We have this other team on the outside that's kind of, this is going to be a controversy, but if we put Ohio State in, we don't have to pick a winner of these two Big 12 teams.
Yeah. That's as close as they've gotten, I think. All the other years have been pretty straightforward of like, all right, these are your 4 teams. Like, that's what it's going to be. Even kind of last year, I think there was a conversation about TCU, but didn't TCU end up being like a 3 seed or something like that? Like, I mean, they ended up making the playoff pretty convincingly. Yeah, because they played Michigan, and that was a 2 versus 3 matchup. To go, and it was Ohio State was the 4 seed last year.
Mm-hmm.
That's what ended up happening.
After losing to Michigan.
Yeah. So I'm excited for the expansion. The expansion is going to be fun. As I mentioned, the home playoff games and just like more football, like that's going to be awesome. I'm curious to see how college football as a whole reacts to more games in it. I know that they're so used to like having 13 game seasons, but look, teams like Georgia have been just fine going to the college football playoff and playing extra games. There hasn't really been a gripe about that. Maybe more than I thought, but 12-team playoff could not come at a better time. And Maddie, with the college football selection committee making their choices on that Sunday and kind of the Monday is like Black Monday, right? When it comes to all the teams firing coaches, some coach firings came open sooner, and you got coaches going all around. The carousel was moving, Maddie. Let's talk about the big one, right? And I think the big one was the opening of Texas A&M, an SEC school that has a lot of money. They paid Jimbo Fisher a whole lot of money just to go and sit on the couch for a year, maybe a couple more. They make the process of getting to the hire that they got to was not good, but they make a good hire ultimately, Maddie, when taking Mike Elko, their former defensive coordinator, he goes off to Duke, has a successful time at Duke. They get Mike Elko as the head ball coach there.
Yeah. So, I mean, you mentioned the process. Here's how it goes down, right? Texas A&M was trying to hire Mark Stoops away from Kentucky. And it sounds like they were like deep into that. But the problem was Mark Stoops is not going to be cheap because he's getting paid SEC money already. He's getting paid big SEC money. So you're going to have to go above and beyond what his current contract is while also shelling out money to Jimbo Fisher to go away, right? It's a really expensive hire to go get Mark Stoops. Great hire, but it's very expensive. Whereas if you go look over and go get Mike Elko, the head coach at Duke, you're not paying him near as much as you have to pay Mark Stoops. I would imagine that contract number ends up almost half of what you would have probably had to pay Stoops to come in. And so now you're saving a little bit of money, but you're also getting a guy who has shown that he can go in, he can rebrand a team, he can build a team up from essentially nothing. Oh, and it kind of helps that Mike Elko has some, connections to Texas A&M. He has some experience there. Like, everything made sense. It's a really good hire for them. I don't want to say it's a home run because we don't know what Elko's ultimate ceiling is. We don't know if this is like a head coach that you're going to ever be putting in your top 10 in the college football, in all of college football. And Texas A&M certainly spends the money to belong there. But I just don't know if Elko gets you there, but it's still a good hire. Like, I think it's a very sound, very acceptable hire. It's financially responsible by Texas A&M, which is a wild sentence to say. But like, yeah, so I feel pretty good about the hire. I think it's going to take them from this like wild card team to becoming a steady presence.
Yeah.
If they end up having a Kentucky like, run in the SEC, I don't think anybody would be surprised, where they're just always a really good hard out for all the best teams. I just don't know if you have that same peak that you thought you had when you hired Jimbo.
For sure. And I think that, they're going for something that's probably more cost effective right now, just because of the situation that they're in when it comes to it. But obviously they've had a few guys hit the transfer portal. That's just how it goes with the changes of coaching staff and everything. They had that number one recruiting class in the country that didn't really pan out all that much for Texas A&M, but they had a really interesting time just trying to get that staff put together. They were calling Klein from Kansas State to come down. Bobby Petrino was that offensive coordinator, but now he's back at Arkansas, which Maddie, needed a refresher on what had happened at Arkansas. So I went back and I read a little bit, because I think when that happened, I don't think I was old enough to really understand the true nature of what was going on. And now I get it. Now I know why it was
the best tweet I saw during all of this was the best thing to come out of the Michigan scandal is it got Bobby Petrino to be pro helmet. And for those that don't know, Bobby Petrino got in a wreck on his motorcycle while he was drunk, correct? Like that was the whole big deal, right? Like
he might have, yeah. And
okay.
he had his mistress on the back of the motorcycle as well.
So this man wrecks his motorcycle. He doesn't have his helmet on. He gets injured, but instead of like calling the police, he tries to like fix it himself. He just tries to take care of the situation himself with his mistress there. It's quite the story to go look it up. But yeah, that was the funniest thing I saw is now because Petrino has come out and said like, hey, we should get communication in the helmets, and so that was a good joke about the whole situation, because I don't know what Arkansas is doing. He's going to be the head coach next year.
That's the thing, is that it's so funny that he's going to end up being the head coach of that team that Sam Pittman has almost certainly lost direction of. He just had KJ Jefferson. Did Jefferson actually officially enter the transfer portal? I know that it was reported that he posted something on his Instagram, was like, haven't made a decision yet.
It's so hard. I don't think he's officially in, because like the thing is, a guy can go to social media, say I'm in the portal, but if he doesn't go file the papers, he's not in the portal. So like all that's going to happen is a bunch of people are going to reach out to him or whoever is, and talking on his behalf and try to figure out. So we don't know, I guess.
Right.
That's the tricky part.
They've lost a lot of the linchpins in that program that have made them good. Rocket Sanders has officially entered the portal, and he is meeting with other teams, other SEC teams, I should say. It doesn't seem like he's going to go anywhere outside of the SEC. So that team's kind of in flux right now. But the hire of Colin Klein as offensive coordinator, I think, is a really good move from Mike Elko there.
Yeah, I think you go get a offensive coordinator that you can kind of relinquish the entire reins of the offense to. And Colin Klein, he's kind of shown at Kansas State that he can play with a variety of different types of quarterbacks. You look at what Elko has had there at Duke with Riley Leonard. It's a guy that can run and throw. That fits a lot of what Colin Klein likes to do. So yeah, you get yourself a proven offensive coordinator that is one with what is going to end up being less talent than he has to work with, just in terms of star rating and prospect rating and everything like that. So that's a very good offensive coordinator hire for Elko to pull in. So that'll be interesting to follow and see kind of what they do. I do believe that they are keeping a lot of their offensive players. 5-star wide receiver Evan Stewart had also mentioned the transfer portal, but I don't think he officially got in it either. So as of right now, it does seem like at least all their offensive players that like really matter to that team have stuck around.
And in kind of like backfilling when it comes to like Mike Elko going to Texas A&M, Duke filled with Manny Diaz, a deal that was, I think this was like just announced like a couple days ago. Manny Diaz going to Duke, kind of speculated. I think they were hot on him for a while. Maddie, what are your thoughts on that hire?
Oh my God, this is my favorite hire because Manny Diaz got a raw deal at Miami. He was a fine coach. He was better at Miami than Mario's been through 2 years. Like, let's call a spade, right? So like, Manny Diaz got a little bit of a raw deal. He now gets to go back to the ACC where he gets to play Miami, who let him go out on the recruiting trail only to call him and be like, hey, man, you're fired. Well, he's literally in the living room of like talking to high schoolers and their families. And they're like, oh, no, you're out. So he gets a little revenge there. He also gets to coach against the biggest rival of North Carolina, who is coached by Mac Brown. Mac Brown, who famously fired Manny Diaz from Texas.
Yeah.
After a random one-off terrible defensive performance. So you now have this wild ACC rivalry head coaching battle set up here with Manny Diaz just coming in to a school like Duke where he's going to get to instill this hard, tough, defensive-minded football team like he has done at Miami and other stops as a defensive coordinator. I think he'll be a quality follow-up to Mike Elko. It'll be interesting to see again what the highs will be, but I just really like the rivalry aspect and the disdain he has to have towards a couple other schools in the ACC.
And I think what's good for Manny Diaz here is the expectations at Duke probably aren't the same as they would be at Miami, let's say, or at maybe even Penn State. I know he's just the DC there, but the expectations probably on our side for him. And I think that'll be good. There is going to be some juice there, as you mentioned, Matty, all the backstory and everything with that. But I like the hire. I think Manny Diaz did good with that Penn State defense. The Penn State defense looked good. And love to see what he can do for Duke. And those Blue Devils there are looking to move on from Mike Elko and another big hire. This was like one of the first hires I feel like that was announced. And I think this was even announced over like Civil War weekend when it happened. And Michigan State hired Jonathan Smith from Oregon State and took him there. I think a lot of people in Michigan State regard this as a really good hire. I think I saw some TikToks of some Goodwills in Corvallis just having all of Jonathan Smith's Oregon State stuff. I don't know if you saw those videos, Maddie, but just like whole wardrobes of Oregon State stuff being dropped off at their stores and people being like, I'm going to spend $300 to get Jonathan Smith's whole wardrobe.
Same.
Yeah.
Would have too. Again, it sounds like it feels like another good hire. Michigan State, especially with some of these other Pac-12 teams coming to the Big Ten next year, is never going to be at the top of the list in terms of talent for a lot of their weekend matchups. They're in the middle of the pack, but like Michigan State's not going to have more talent than Michigan, Ohio State, Washington, or like all these teams are going to have better players. But that's been Jonathan Smith's like entire career while at Oregon State. They're not the most talented team, but what they do is they pull you into this buzzsaw, mud fight, and they come out on top a lot. And that feels like it kind of fits what Michigan State has been about when they have been good, when they have had winning seasons. It feels like it's kind of been that. So like, I think he makes sense for like what that culture is. He'll be okay not winning 5-star recruiting battles, but taking a bunch of 3 stars that fit what he does and be a pain in the butt for a lot of teams. And when he gets that old team, when he has a team full of a bunch of juniors, seniors, redshirt seniors, they might make a little bit of noise in the Big Ten. So like, I think it's a really good hire. I don't think you really have any questions about him being able to build up that program because Michigan State is kind of just like a better funded Oregon State, more or less. Yeah.
I think a lot of people were surprised he took this job just because he went to Oregon State and he was kind of an Oregon State guy. But the money talks. They did backfill with another guy who went to Oregon State, Trip Bray. Was their defensive coordinator? Is that right?
Yes.
And so I know he also went to Oregon State. He's an Oregon State guy. People in Oregon State seem to be excited about that as well, keeping him on staff there. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting time for Oregon State as they try to navigate this Pac-2 situation and their scheduling and all that, and see what's next for Oregon State. So for that program to be in flux like it is and this going into this year is tough. But I mean, Washington State's got a little bit more of stability there. I think we'll see. But it appears they have a little bit more. But yeah, Oregon State doing that. But then let's move on to the Big 12 because this is a guy that Willie Fritz was a guy who was talked about a lot in terms of like last coaching cycle of a guy who could get a big Power 5 job. Maddie, he takes the job at Houston. Do you think he could have got a bigger Power 5 job?
It feels like it, but yeah. there must be something there to where he hasn't got a better job offer. Now, I do know some people that feel like Houston is a lot better job than what it's looked like because you're in Houston, you're in Texas, you have a lot of recruits around. They have boosters willing to pay money So like some people do think it's a little bit better job than what it looks like on the surface. I'm just a little surprised that a team hasn't been ready to hire him up to a higher level. But then also at the same time, you kind of got to look, Willie Fritz, while very successful football coach, I don't know if how he works on the recruiting trail. I don't know if he's going to be a guy that's going to go out there and compete with the biggest of names. So if you're going to hire Willie Fritz to a high profile job, how's that recruiting battle going to go? At Houston, you don't have to recruit in the top 20 every single year to have success for that team. And then you also get a good ball coach. So I think it accomplishes having a step up because you're getting into the Big 12. You're going to what is a Power 5 conference. And you have slightly higher ceiling as an overall team success, but you don't have the same expectations of going to like a more blue blood type team. So good move for both sides. I'm a little surprised that Willie Fritz hasn't been in the running for some bigger jobs even.
For sure. And I agree with that. You know, this guy's a Missouri guy, and he coached at Central Missouri for a while, played at Pitt State. So he won a national championship there, has some ties locally to Kansas City. He's done a really good job at Tulane, bringing Tulane back to prominence. And I know that his loyalty to Tulane this year almost lost him out on a job, right? Because he wanted to wait around until like Tulane finished their season, and these schools don't want to wait that long. Like they don't want to wait until December to make this coaching hire. They want to make it up in November. I can remember when Missouri fired Barry Odom, and they wanted somebody that, you know, could come in and kind of save the recruiting class, right? A little bit, try to keep some of those guys. And they had Eli Drinkwitz come in after that. I think he was named like the first week in December. So that was even kind of late if I remember correctly. But they backfilled to Tulane does with John Summerall, which I think is a really good hire for them. He comes from Troy, which Troy was a very good Sun Belt team this year. When it comes to it, they played against App State in the championship, and they won the championship, correct? Troy did for the Sun Belt. So
yeah, they kind of beat them down.
Yes, they did. A team that's been built on defense. I think the identity of that of John Summerall could fit well in Tulane.
Yeah, listen, Willie Fritz is a very good coach. I don't know if Tulane got worse at all at the head coach. I mean, John Summerall's been amazing at Troy. You're taking a step up. You're still going to be recruiting the same general areas. You probably now have a little bit more money to go get better recruits, better prospects. You can continue to build the team the same way through the defense. Every now and then you might hit on a quarterback that allows you to make a really good run, like Fritz did with Tulane and Michael Pratt over the last couple of years. So like, I think this is an excellent hire. Tulane must have had a little bit of money sitting in their back pocket to pry him away from Troy, right? Like they must have had some, because like there's no reason for him to leave Troy. Like Troy's been a very good job for what he is. I think Summerall might very much see this as a stepping stone to get into the Power 5 in a way that Troy wasn't. He might try to follow Willie Fritz's. This one, of all the ones we talked about, Summerall might be at his spot the shortest amount of time, because I think if he continues to have success there, if he follows Fritz, has the same level of success, I don't know if you're going to wait much more than 2 years to see him get like a really good offer from an even bigger school from here.
It would be really interesting. I know his name has been thrown around even to some of these smaller, I don't necessarily want to say smaller, from the lower level Power 5 teams I'd seen when they were doing their searches. They were looking for him as well. And Maddie, this next hire, Kurt Signetti, okay. He leaves our Dukes, and he basically takes the whole Duke staff with him to Indiana. Great hire by Indiana, I think. I think this is a great hire by Indiana, a team that historically doesn't buy coaches out when it comes to Indiana, and they bought out was it Tom Allen, right? Is that his name?
Yes, they did.
They bought him out. I think it was like $20 million. I think they might have worked it down to like 19 or something like that. But they bring on Kurt Signetti, who has done one hell of a job at James Madison, bringing them up from the FCS ranks, winning FCS national champions there, to bringing them up to the FBS ranks and making them kind of run the Sun Belt a little bit. But Maddie, thoughts on this hire?
So Indiana decided that they're going to finally start paying a little bit of money into their football program. And it makes sense, right? They need to stay in the Big Ten as things expand.
Yeah.
I think they see spending a little bit more money as money's only going to keep coming in from the TV deals will allow them to just be, if they come in and they be competent, they get a stick in the league, hand out, take a bunch of losses, but they get a stick in the league and make a lot of money. So like they needed to do something to make sure they do that. Going to get Cignetti is perfect for that. He's going to come in and he is going to maximize absolutely everything about that program that can be maximized. If they give him a little bit of money, he will get to use all of that. And I mean, he's going to come in. He's already said, they're going to meet Rutgers, Ohio State, Michigan. Like, yeah, okay. We all know that some of that's not true, right? But as long as they aren't the worst team in the Big Ten year after year, they kind of get this nice, safe spot in there. I think he's a guy that will fit in perfect with that. And like, he's the opposite of Summerall. I don't think that he's trying to use this to catapult to a bigger, better job. He's not a young coach. Like he's been around a while. He's probably okay just collecting the money, being a good coach, making sure that this team is at least respected, and then he's happy. And then Indiana gets to be happy. So like they don't have to worry about another coaching search in another couple of years.
And to backfill that for James Madison, they brought in Bob Chesney. Great hire from Holy Cross. I'm sure you haven't really heard of Holy Cross, but 44 in 2021 in his time there in the Patriot League at 28-4 in conference play for old Bob Chesney there. I don't know how old he is off the top of my head. Doesn't look like he's very
46.
Old. Yeah,
he is young.
He's a young coach to lead a team that will be in the first season of their full FBS eligibility, I believe is what next year is for James Madison. So I think it's a good hire for them. He was a guy who kind of had a little bit of buzz for these group of 5 teams as well. I think Tulane, he was in buzz for Tulane and maybe even Troy a little bit as well when they were trying to fill that job. But I do think that that's a good hire for them. I know Holy Cross probably doesn't move a whole lot of needles for a lot of people when they hear about the Crusaders, but we'll see how that all works out for James Madison.
I mean, like it's a good hire. It's the same thing that they did with Cignetti and before. They go and they find a coach that has won at lower levels, that has just proven to be a winner over and over again. Like, hey, go ask Washington how that's worked with, Kalen DeBoer, right? Just sometimes guys just kind of win. They're just kind of good at it and they win. And like, that is what Chesney seems to be. He's had a lot of success there at Holy Cross at lower levels before that. It sounds like it's a potential that the quarterback that he had at Holy Cross, Matt Sluka, might be able to transfer into JMU, because I do believe JMU is losing their quarterback that they've had this past season. Mm-hmm. He was pretty good. He was pretty good for Holy Cross, so they might get to bring somebody he's familiar with at the QB position that would allow them to maybe continue this stretch they've been on the last 2 years. I do. I think it's a good hire. They get a little younger. They get a little bit more, I don't want to say stable, because obviously Cignetti was stable, but they get a guy that can be with them for a little while to keep our JMU Dukes on the up and up and ride through the Sun Belt, hopefully full-time
Sun Belt members, full-time FBS members coming into this year. And Maddie, what might have been the most, maybe fair to say, shocking coaching move that happened in the middle of the year this year? With Colorado just saying, Sean Lewis, you can go kick some rocks. Who Sean Lewis was, am I thinking of, he was at Kent State right before that?
Yeah.
Okay, so he's at Kent State, and Kent State, not an easy place to historically win at, and he won there. Like, he won some games there. I think he brought them to a couple bowl games as well. He showed to be a very revolutionary mind in terms of offensive play calling, but I think what happened was like he brought Pat Shermer? Is that who Dion brought in to be an offensive analyst? Which, like, those two styles of offensive football don't really mesh all that well. So Sean Lewis ended up getting the short end of the stick. He got kicked out. He now is the head ball coach at San Diego State, who had was it Brady Hoke retired there?
Yes, retired with quotes.
Forcibly removed. Asked to retire.
Forcibly asked to get the hell out. So it's interesting. I wonder what happened in Colorado. I wonder if it wasn't known to everybody, I guess, but I mean, it's specifically to Sean Lewis and, then to Dion, that teams were going to sniff around trying to bring him on, right? That somebody was trying to hire him, and Dion, instead of just saying like, oh, okay, we'll keep play calling all year, let's give these duties to somebody else and see how it plays out. that doesn't make sense. No team does it that way, but this is Dion who does things his own way anyway. Like if Dion knows that Sean Lewis might be done at the end of the year or has been told like, hey, he's getting offers to be a head coach, he's probably going to take them. What good does it do a non-bowl going team that's trying to figure things out to let somebody else do it? Now, I don't think Pat Shermer's going to be their OC next year either. So like it's really weird. Or maybe Dion just screwed the pooch and, threw the guy to the side that's really good. I don't know. Fun hire for San Diego State. I think this is perfect. San Diego State, it's San Diego. Those people in San Diego don't want to watch a team go win 6-0. They don't want to watch zero. I mean, think about the fan base of San Diego. They don't want to go watch a defensive slugfest where the ball gets run 44 times and there's like 128 total offensive yards for their team. Sean Lewis is going to bring in the air raid. He's going to bring in his own version of offense. And it might take a couple years to get the kind of system in place that he needs from a team that has been absent of offense for a long time now. But I think once it starts clicking, it'll be a lot more fun for like that fan base to go watch them. And like, hopefully they find some success along the way. Cause he was really good at Kent State. Like he really had that program operating above what they should be.
Yeah. Kent State historically not a very good MAC program. And he had them being incredibly respectable. When it comes to other OCs going on to head coaching jobs, Mississippi State, they hired Jeff Lebby, who came from Oklahoma. Now, Oklahoma's quarterback, Dylan Gabriel, hit the transfer portal. Some speculated that maybe Mississippi State could be a landing spot for him. What better could it be for Jeff Lebby to go there and have a quarterback who already knows his system, kind of help implement the offense? That's kind of the thought process there. We'll see where that ends up being. But thoughts on Jeff Lebby being the head coach there in Starkville?
It's the same concept of bringing like Mike Leach when they did. Obviously, Leach was more, rest in peace. He was a little bit more like proven. But it's the same thing. You're going to come in, you're going to bring a unique offense so that when Alabama or Georgia come roll into town, they maybe aren't fully prepared for what you're about to do, and you can catch them sleeping. You hope to catch one or two of those teams that are better than every year you've done you sleeping. That gets you to a bowl game. You're never going to win at Mississippi State, but you run a unique enough offense. I think they kind of tried being that defensive team this year and it just didn't work. So it makes sense for the program of what Mississippi State is. And, we'll just have to see. We'll have to see how it plays out. I really think they're just trying to go that Mike Leach angle again, which worked out relatively well for them when they did.
Look, they tried the defensive coordinator route as they elevated their defensive coordinator when Mike Leach was there to head coach. They took the interim tag off of him and then fired him. And that did not work out very well. Maddie, any other ones that you want to talk about? Any other coaches that you want to talk about, head coaching jobs, coordinators? Because there's been some movement recently. Any ones that are specifically that you want to really hit on?
Yeah, I think two coordinators that I just want, that I think are good. USC, Lincoln Riley looks like he finally, we all know he got rid of Alex Grinch, and he brought in D'Anton Lynn, defensive coordinator at UCLA. Anyone that's watched UCLA over the past couple of years, very good defense. USC, not a good defense. I think that's a good hire. Like he's going to have the same amount of talent he had at UCLA. He had that defense going. As long as Lincoln Riley doesn't run super soft practices, that doesn't let Lynn do what he needs to do in practice, I think it'll be good. But like if Lynn fails here and that USC defense doesn't take huge steps, then it's a Lincoln Riley problem through and through. And there's just no fixing it. It's something that he's doing outside of what you see on game day, because Lynn won't have that same level of defense that we've seen out of USC unless somebody, Lincoln Riley, is preventing him. And kind of on the flip side, Penn State going to Kansas, pulling out Andy Kotelnicki. Probably my favorite coordinator hire that one could have made this year. I mean, like, watching this Kansas offense as of the past couple seasons has been phenomenal. I can't stand the team, but I love what their offense looks like. It is just one of the most unique things. They make it so easy with all the motion, all the throwbacks, how many guys are just wide open all the time. So like, I think this is an amazing hire for a offense that seems to get really stuck in the mud and lack creativity a lot.
They do have a very creative offense. And having a creative offense in Happy Valley would be a refreshing thing to see, especially if you pair them with the defensive talent that they have had in years past. But Maddie, should we hit some transfer portal guys? Because the quarterback market right now going nuts. It's going absolutely insane when you just look at some of the names going in there. Cam Ward, Will Howard. Will Howard's got Lane Kiffin flying to Kansas for him. He's got Lincoln Riley. he's got guys flying to
I
Manhattan,
don't get it.
Kansas to go meet with him. I mentioned Dylan Gabriel. We've hit on Riley Leonard. I think it's kind of presumed that Riley Leonard will go to Notre Dame, even
I think
though
it's like all but locked up that
yeah.
he's gonna be there.
A lot of these guys really know where they're going before they enter the portal, especially if you're a quarterback. When it
Brock
comes down to that,
Vandegrift to Kentucky, locked in.
yeah, maybe it was. Um, that's an interesting one, dude. The Kentucky, Kentucky just coming off of a quarterback transfer experience that probably was not what they expected it to be.
Yeah.
With Devin Leary, that's a tough one. But anyone who's entered the transfer portal, I guess we'll start on the quarterback wise. You're really interested to see where they land.
I mean, I think there's a bunch of interesting ones. I think the big one, if you are a team that thinks you're close to winning it all, bring in Cam Ward and just see what happens. Like,
Yeah.
I think the rumor is that Ohio State has been kind of interested. That makes so much sense. I don't think Ohio State has like a guy that is just like 100% better than Kyle McCord ready to come in. I do believe they have a really good one of the top quarterbacks from the 24 class coming in, but like you don't expect a true freshman to hit the ground running.
Right.
So if you get Cam Ward for 1 year, get him in this Ohio State system with Ryan Day where stuff can be spread out a little bit. Like I think that makes a ton of sense. But what's more interesting to me is more than like the 1 year guy. Aiden Chiles, who was at Oregon State, they started getting him on the field a little bit for one series a game every now and then, and Dante Moore at UCLA. Where do these freshman quarterbacks go? Like these guys have both got a little bit of experience as freshmen. And for Dante Moore, it didn't always go great there at UCLA. For Chiles, it went pretty well down the stretch. Like he found success when he was in the game. Where did these two highly recruited, like 5-star, 4-star QBs end up transferring to after just one season? Chiles probably follows Jonathan Smith to Michigan State. Like, we don't need to split too many hairs on that, most likely, but we'll see. I think getting one of those two guys a year after they were so highly recruited and everybody wanted them, like that could be a big win for any coach that needs somebody in case something didn't pan out for him.
I mean, DJU's in the transfer portal too, as well, correct? Like there's a ton of guys in the portal right now. Kyle McCord visited with Nebraska. It sounds like he's going to stay in the Big Ten. Like Maddie, I don't know how you feel about this. How do you feel about intra-conference transfers?
I think it's great if you're Kyle McCord and Ryan Day simply said, "You're not good enough. Can you please leave?" And now you get a chance to go beat them. Like,
yeah,
why not? Have fun. Go, sure, go for it. It doesn't bother me at all. The only time it doesn't make sense or doesn't not make sense, but the only time where I'm just kind of like, is if a player has success and maybe the season doesn't go the way they want, or they just like, oh, maybe I can go get more money from somebody else. And then they transfer out. Like, I don't know, Dominic Lovett maybe did from Missouri to Georgia, where he's just like, hey, I did really good. We had a fine year, but I think I can do better than you. So let me leave. And he gets to go through the conference. Like it's a little annoying, I'm sure, for the team. Like, I don't actually care. I probably have thought about it one time right now since it happened, but I'm fine with it.
I think so too. I think it adds a little bit more to rivalries and stuff like that, and can create rivalries that aren't there, which I think is especially good. Is the Big Ten, Maddie? Are they getting rid of divisions next year with them coming in? Or are they still keeping them?
They have gotten rid of divisions for next year.
Thank goodness, because I don't need to watch Iowa in another Big Ten championship game.
Yeah, no, you shouldn't have to do that.
Yeah, that's cruel and unusual punishment is what that should be classified as. SEC is getting rid of divisions for next year as well. I think all the other conferences had already gotten rid of divisions.
The SEC is a little more weird. I mean, I guess they did add. I forgot they added Oklahoma and Texas because like it's been known for so long. So like I forgot they're finally coming over, and that messed everything up. So yeah, I think everyone's divisionless now, which is nice.
Yeah, I think the ACC and the Big 12 dropped that last year, I want to say, when the rule went into effect. They're like, all right, fine, we'll drop them right now. Yeah. And the Pac-12, of course, doesn't exist anymore, but they still didn't do divisions. So,
what if the Pac-2 does divisions?
That'd be great. What if instead of a Pac-12 championship game, they do a Pac-2 championship series? So it's like they just play each other.
Best of 8 or 9?
Best of 9. Whoever wins the most out of the 9.
What if you win 5 in a row? Do you just get to have the next 4 off?
I think so. You play the Mountain West is what you do. whoever wants to play. Because I'm really wildly curious to how that's all going to work out. Like I know that
Yeah.
they're like they've given them like rights to the Pac-12 or something like that. But the naming and everything like that. But we'll see how it goes, Matty. But anyone else in the transfer portal you want to talk about? I know we got some other like we just talked about quarterbacks, and there's obviously other good players that hit the portal, but
Yeah.
go for it.
I think it'll be easier if we just kind of touch on them as we go, maybe, or get into them in the summer and stuff like that. 'Cause there's probably a
Yeah.
bunch of names that we don't know are in or out. How many guys are entering just to leverage more money from their teams? The only one that really stuck out to me was Walter Nolan, Texas A&M. He was like one of the top recruits from that recruiting class we were talking about a couple years ago. That was one of the best ever. He really came on this year. He's a defensive lineman. He's a stud. And the fact that he's in the portal, you want to talk about a position that doesn't hit the portal a ton and a guy that might get a lot of money. Walter Nolan's going to be interesting to see where he ends up. I think Tennessee, he's from Tennessee, if I remember right. They made a pretty big run at him when he was coming out, so he might end up there. But like every single team, especially in the SEC, if they have any interest, will probably be all over him. So like I think that's the one big name I kind of got my eye on.
Princely you, that edge from I'm not gonna try
Yeah.
to say his last name. From Florida. I think people maybe anticipated him to go to the draft, but instead is declaring to come back, but enter the transfer portal.
Yeah.
We're seeing that a bit more of like with guys who are saying like, hey, I'm coming back to school, but I'm also gonna transfer, so I'm not gonna be here. And so I'm excited to
Old
see
Billy
where they're gonna go.
Napes.
Yeah,
Old Billy Napes.
he also is losing Trevor Etienne. He's also hit the transfer portal as well. Is reportedly meeting with
That's okay. Graham
Georgia.
Mertz is back, right?
Good deal. Graham Mertz is back, baby. Unfinished business for old Graham Mertz. But yeah, we'll update the transfer portal as it happens because this stuff does move quick. And I think this early window for transfer portal, I'm not sure the dates off the top of my head, but I think it will close here in a couple, maybe a week, I think is when it closes. But obviously those guys can still commit to wherever they want to go. But Maddie, any final thoughts before we go?
Just on the idea of the transfer portal, the quarterback position's loaded in the portal right now. I'm interested to see what happens with Malik Murphy from Texas. It sounds like
Oh,
Quinn
yeah.
Ewers might be coming back to Texas, and if that's the case, where does Malik Murphy see his role there? Right, like obviously that team is going to go to Archie Manning by next year, if not after. So if Quinn Ewers comes back, who I don't think he can transfer again yet, he's not going to be a grad, so like he's already out of his one free transfer. If he decides to come back, I think Malik Murphy has to dip out, and he immediately kind of skyrockets to the top of that QB list too. So that's just one more big name that I don't think we'll hear about until after the playoff. If Quinn Ewers goes off and has a great run and wins Texas the Natty, maybe he goes off into the draft because his draft stock gets boosted. But if not, that's one more guy I got my eye on that I think really could end up in the draft or the portal. And I haven't heard like really any rumors about it. It just doesn't make any sense for him to stick on the Longhorns if Ewers comes back.
It looks like January 2nd is the last day of the transfer portal for this.
Oh, so he won't even get to know about Quinn Ewers then, huh?
Yeah. So looks like that's the last day that you can enter the transfer. The transfer window closes on January 2nd. Is what
But then there's like
I'm
another
seeing.
window, isn't there? I
Yeah,
thought
there
there's sometimes
is.
they can transfer again in like the spring or something. Like there's too many windows. It's got to be
Mhm.
fixed next year. Like I just said, next year we're going to be having playoff games happening like this weekend. You can't be having guys ditch your team, or like you can't have your head coach being trying to prepare for a playoff, but also playing the transfer portal. Like you think Nick Saban's going to be okay with that? He's going to get that rule changed.
Yeah.
There's going to be different windows next year, guaranteed.
It's May 1st to May 15th is what other sports spring window would be. May 1st to May 15th, and December 4th to January 2nd is what it is for transfer windows. That's according to the NCAA themselves. I got that from their chart that they have here. If you want to know what the rifle transfer window is too, I got it right in front of me. Don't test me.
It's not lacrosse. We got to shout out
Yeah.
Buckner.
You gotta shout. That is one of the craziest stories because he was at Notre Dame, right, playing football first, and then transferred to Alabama,
Quarterback. Yeah.
and then said, "You know what? I'm gonna go back to Notre Dame, but instead of playing football at Notre Dame, I'm gonna play lacrosse at Notre Dame." And I think they just won the national championship. Is that right? Notre Dame did in lacrosse.
Sure. Yeah, I follow it.
I figured you would know that. Let's see. When is the lacrosse one? Cross country. Oh no,
He
that's
was one of
field
the
hockey.
top lacrosse recruits coming out of the country of high school before deciding to play quarterback. I mean, I assume that was the case, right? Like, I
Yeah.
assume that he was probably a lacrosse player. I think it's just funny that like he went to Bama, he played quarterback in Notre Dame, wasn't very good, but like they're like, maybe. He goes to Bama and is like, oh, I can't win the job here. I guess I'm not good enough at this sport. Let me hit my backup sport, lacrosse.
Sunday, May 12th to June 10th. Monday, June 10th is when the lacrosse transfer window is. I didn't realize it was a spring sport. I thought it was a fall sport, but I guess it's not.
Did he transfer as a football player and then just decide to go play lacrosse? Like, how did he get a transfer now?
I don't know. He might be.
This is a well we don't have to go down in minute 50.
That's fair. I assume he's just like transferring to go to school there and then walking onto the lacrosse program. He's gonna be able to play lacrosse this year though, because that's a spring sport. Because the season will be I guess he's not playing for Alabama anymore. Okay, sorry, we don't have to do that. He could do it. He could win 2 national championships this year. It's possible. Think about that.
So if Milroe gets hurt before the Natty, could Buckner play quarterback for Bama in January and lacrosse for Notre Dame in May?
I think Buckner's already like not with the team anymore.
I think so too. Like I feel like that's so too. But like if he just held
but
off,
in theory, yes. In theory, yes, I think he could. Which is fun. That's really fun. All right. That's probably a good sign that we should end this podcast since we're talking about
I think so.
lacrosse transfer rules. But that's going to do it this week's edition of Barely Bowl Eligible. That's Matt Lane. I'm Tucker Frank, and we'll catch you guys next week with more college football news.